Nolan pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as the wind howled across the icy plains of Varlin. The sky was a deep purple, streaked with pale green lights that danced like fire across the horizon. For 10 years, humans had struggled to live on this planet, far from Earth, far from warmth and comfort. The colony was small, just a cluster of metal domes and tunnels buried under layers of ice, but it was home. The cold was a constant companion. Every day, humans wore heavy suits and relied on heating systems to survive. Supplies came from Earth only rarely, so everyone had to make do with what they had. Food, water, and fuel were carefully rationed. Even the simplest tasks required effort. Yet, Nolan loved this place in a strange way. The harshness made humans stronger, more determined. It was a challenge unlike any other. Nolan worked as an engineer. His job was to maintain the colony's energy systems, to keep the lights on, the heaters running, and the machines alive. Tonight, he was checking one of the power generators, a large metal cylinder buried in the snow. Sparks flew as he adjusted wires and monitored readings. The temperature outside was dropping fast, and he could see his own breath forming clouds in the dim light. As he worked, something caught his eye. A figure was moving across the ice. Nolan froze. At first, he thought it was a trick of the wind or snow, but the movement was deliberate. It was tall and thin, with a shape unlike any human. He had heard stories of the Zillan aliens who lived beneath the ice, rarely seen by humans. Long ago, there had been a tense encounter. Humans and Zillan had exchanged words and gestures, but trust had never fully formed. Since then, the Zillan stayed hidden, and humans kept to their domes. Nolan's heart beat faster. The figure stopped a few meters from the generator. It did not move aggressively, only observed. Nolan felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. Could this be a real Zillan, or was he imagining things after a long day of work? He slowly reached for his communication device, hoping to signal the colony, but something in the figure's posture stopped him. It did not look hostile. The Zillan moved closer, its steps careful and slow. Nolan noticed its skin shimmered faintly in the light, reflecting shades of blue and silver. Its eyes, large and luminous, held intelligence and patience. It lifted a hand in a gesture that seemed almost human. Nolan hesitated but returned a small wave. For a long moment, they just watched each other. The wind blew around them, carrying the sound of ice cracking in the distance. Nolan's mind raced with questions. Why was it here now, after 10 years of silence? What did it want? Then, a voice filled his mind. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. One night, the Zillan said, and Nolan felt the words more than heard them. One night. That is all I ask. Nolan's first thought was disbelief. The Zillan could communicate in ways humans did not understand. Somehow, it was speaking directly to his mind, sharing its meaning without words. Nolan swallowed and nodded slowly, though the Zillan could not see it. He did not fully understand, but something in the alien's tone felt sincere. I will listen, Nolan replied aloud, his voice small against the wind. The Zillan inclined its head, then stepped back slightly, giving Nolan space. The air between them seemed to hold a strange energy. Nolan realized the alien had been alone for a long time, watching the colony from a distance, never daring to approach. 10 years of isolation in the frozen dark had left its mark. Nolan felt a sudden sympathy for the creature, a connection he could not explain. Nolan worked quickly but carefully, finishing his generator check. Every sound of machinery felt louder now, more urgent, as if the planet itself were waiting to see what would happen. He kept glancing at the Zillan, which stayed still, patient and calm, a silent observer in the endless white. Finally, Nolan made a decision. He could have returned to the safety of the dome, warning the others and ending the encounter, but something told him this night was important. He stepped closer to the Zillan, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. The alien did not retreat. Instead, it extended one hand, palm up, in an invitation of trust. Nolan hesitated only for a moment before placing his hand above it, feeling a faint warmth despite the icy air. The sky above Varlin continued to glow with green and purple lights. Wind swept the plains, carrying the chill and the silence. For the first time in a decade, two species faced each other without fear. One night, the Zillan had asked. One night could change everything. Nolan did not know what would come next, but he knew this encounter would be remembered forever. The night stretched on, cold and quiet, but full of possibility. The frozen world around them seemed less lonely than before. Nolan and the Zillan remained, two beings from different worlds, beginning a night that could change the fate of humans and aliens alike. Nolan and the Zillan stood in the icy night, the wind biting at their faces but neither moving away. Nolan's mind raced, trying to understand the alien before him. Its eyes reflected intelligence and loneliness, a depth that told him it had been alone for a long time. 10 years of silence had not made it bitter. It only seemed to want connection. The Zillan tilted its head and reached out again. This time, Nolan noticed a small device on its arm, glowing faintly. As soon as it activated, images and feelings flooded Nolan's mind. He saw the Zillan's world beneath the ice, dark tunnels, glowing crystals, and quiet chambers where others of its kind had once lived. He felt the loneliness, the years of waiting, and the hope that perhaps humans could be different. Nolan gasped softly, stepping back slightly. He had never experienced communication like this before. He realized that the Zillan did not speak with words but shared its thoughts directly, a connection that was immediate and powerful. In that instant, Nolan understood why it had asked for only one night. It needed time, but not too much at once. "I will listen," Nolan said again, more firmly this time. He stepped closer, his gloved hand hovering near the Zillan's. The alien's eyes flickered, almost like a smile. For the first time, Nolan felt a sense of trust that was rare on Varlin. Both had been cautious, but now they were willing to meet in the middle. The Zillan began to share its memories. Nolan saw bright streaks of light across icy caves, felt the chill of the underground streams, and sensed the presence of other Zillan who had disappeared long ago. He learned about their simple way of life, how they survived the harsh ice, and how they had watched humans from a distance. The images showed no aggression, only curiosity and observation. Nolan realized that humans and Zillan were not so different. Both had faced isolation, fear, and uncertainty. Humans struggled above the ice while Zillan thrived below it, each adapting in their own way. The thought gave Nolan hope. If understanding could begin in one night, then cooperation might follow. "You have been alone a long time," Nolan said softly. He tried to reach the Zillan not only with words but with a feeling of empathy. The Zillan responded with a slow nod, and a warmth spread through Nolan's mind, comforting and strange. He realized that the alien did not ask for friendship lightly. 10 years of cold nights had taught it patience, and tonight it had chosen to trust a human. Nolan wanted to show the Zillan more of human life. He spoke of the colony, of small gardens under the dome, of the machines that made life possible, and of the people who worked tirelessly every day. He told stories of struggles and achievements, of the warmth humans found in small victories. The Zillan watched and felt each story, its understanding growing with every word. The night deepened, and the stars above Varlin glittered like diamonds. The wind seemed to calm as if it recognized the peace between the two. Nolan walked carefully around the Zillan, pointing out details of the generator and the frost patterns that covered the ice. He explained how humans survived the long nights and bitter cold. The Zillan responded with images of tunnels and glowing crystals, showing the adaptations of its people. For hours, they shared knowledge. The Zillan revealed hidden passages beneath the ice, secret places humans had never discovered. Nolan explained the importance of the colony's energy systems and the balance needed to keep life alive. Each learned from the other, realizing that survival on Varlin required cooperation, not isolation. Finally, the Zillan paused. Its eyes seemed to glow brighter, and a soft wave of energy passed to Nolan, a gesture of gratitude. Nolan nodded, understanding that this moment was the beginning of something larger than themselves. Trust had been fragile, but it had started to grow. One night was all the Zillan had asked, but in that night, they had begun to bridge a gap that had lasted a decade. Nolan looked around at the icy plains, feeling a sense of wonder. For the first time, the vast cold did not feel empty. It was filled with possibility. The Zillan's presence was no longer frightening but hopeful. Humans and aliens could learn from each other, share knowledge, and survive together. The thought made Nolan's chest feel light despite the chill. As the night slowly moved toward dawn, Nolan and the Zillan remained near each other, watching the green and purple lights in the sky. Neither spoke aloud, words were not needed. They had shared more than stories, they had shared understanding, patience, and respect. The first step toward lasting friendship had been taken, and both knew the coming days would test it. The Zillan finally stepped back slightly and nodded. Nolan nodded in return. The night had been long and cold, but it had been important. One night had given them a chance to connect, and in that connection, a new hope had begun. Both species now understood that survival on Varlin would require more than strength. It would require trust, courage, and the willingness to see each other as allies. Nolan took a deep breath of the icy air, feeling its sharpness but also its clarity. For the first time in 10 years, he felt that the frozen world of Varlin was not only a place to survive but a place where two worlds might finally meet. The night on Varlin was silent except for the wind and the distant creaking of ice. Nolan and the Zillan stood near the edge of the colony, the glow from the dome lights casting long shadows across the snow. The alien's eyes reflected the cold sky, but there was a softness in its gaze now. It had shared its past in fragments, and Nolan had shared the life of humans on the frozen planet. A connection had begun to grow. The Zillan moved slowly toward a small ridge of ice, gesturing for Nolan to follow. As they walked, the alien projected images into Nolan's mind, showing places deep beneath the frozen surface. Nolan saw long tunnels filled with glowing crystals, underground lakes, and chambers that seemed to hum with energy. The Zillan's kind had lived here for generations, adapting to darkness and cold in ways humans could not imagine. Nolan felt a sense of awe. These were not the monsters of old stories but beings who had endured hardship, just like humans. He realized that survival could take many forms, and strength was not always measured by muscle or weapon. Sometimes, it was patience, knowledge, and resilience. The Zillan paused before a small opening in the ice, one that led down into the tunnels. It gestured again, inviting Nolan to see more. Nolan hesitated, thinking of the colony and the safety of the domes. Yet, the trust between them was growing, and curiosity pushed him forward. He followed the Zillan into the icy passage, stepping carefully over frozen stones. Inside, the tunnels were bright with the soft glow of the crystals. The walls shimmered in colors Nolan had never seen before. The air was cool but not bitter, and the silence was complete. The Zillan moved gracefully, showing him small chambers where its people had lived. Nolan could sense the history here, the lives that had come before, and the patience it took to endure alone. The Zillan shared memories not as words but as feelings and images. Nolan saw the Zillan as a young being, learning to navigate the tunnels and survive under the ice. He felt the fear during storms, the excitement of discovery, and the sadness of losing companions to accidents and disease. Then, he felt the loneliness, the long years without contact, without conversation, without trust from outsiders. It was a cold that went deeper than ice or wind. Nolan understood now why the Zillan had asked for one night. It did not need food, shelter, or protection. It needed connection, a brief understanding that it was not completely alone in the universe. Nolan thought about the human colonists above, how they struggled in their own way against the endless cold. He realized that both species had been shaped by hardship, each learning to endure and adapt in its own way. Nolan spoke softly, sharing more of human life. He told stories of children growing up in the colony, learning to work with machines and survive storms. He spoke of engineers and scientists who fixed generators and built shelters, of gardeners who grew food under artificial light. Each story carried pride and hope, showing the Zillan that humans were not only survivors but also dreamers, capable of learning and caring for each other. The Zillan responded with gentle projections, showing how it had observed humans for years. It had seen them fall in storms, rebuild their shelters, and continue despite fear and exhaustion. It had watched children play in the snow, learning to be strong in a harsh world. The Zillan shared admiration and respect, feelings Nolan had not expected from a species so different from humans. As they shared stories, a bond grew. The Zillan began to see humans not as invaders or threats but as beings with determination and courage. Nolan saw the Zillan not as strange or alien but as a creature shaped by hardship and intelligence, capable of friendship and trust. Each began to understand that survival required more than strength or weapons, it required understanding and cooperation. Hours passed in silence and conversation. The tunnels echoed with memories and shared knowledge, forming a bridge between two worlds. Nolan felt that the cold outside mattered less now because the warmth of understanding had begun to grow between them. He realized that this night could mark a new beginning, not just for the Zillan, but for the human colony above. Finally, the Zillan paused, its luminous eyes meeting Nolan's. A wave of calm passed through his mind, a silent message of thanks. Nolan smiled, feeling hope and determination. One night had been all the Zillan asked, but in that single night, they had shared enough to plant the seeds of trust. They emerged from the tunnels just before the first light of Varlan's sun touched the horizon. The ice reflected shades of purple and green, beautiful and cold. Nolan looked at the Zillan, realizing that 10 years of loneliness could be ended by a single night of understanding. The Zillan inclined its head, and Nolan nodded. The bond between them was small but strong, a fragile start to a friendship that could change the fate of both species. The sky brightened, and the wind carried the promise of a new day. Humans and Zillan, separated by ice and fear for so long, had begun to learn from each other. One night had become more than a meeting, it had become a bridge between two worlds, showing that courage, understanding, and hope could survive even in the coldest night. The first light of Varlan's sun touched the colony, turning the ice into a pale gold. Nolan returned to the domes, his mind still full of images and feelings from the tunnels. The Zillan had shown him its world and shared its long years of loneliness. Nolan felt a deep respect for the alien and a hope that humans and Zillan could learn from each other. But not everyone in the colony felt the same way. News of Nolan's encounter spread quickly. People whispered as he walked through the halls. Some were curious, but many were afraid. Humans had lived on Varlan for 10 years, struggling against storms and isolation, and the thought of trusting an alien after past conflicts made them uneasy. Nolan met Lena, the colony leader, in the main hall. Her face was tense, her eyes sharp. "Nolan, I heard you went outside last night," she said. "With the Zillan. Are you serious? After everything we have survived, you went out there alone?" Nolan nodded calmly. "I did, and I spoke with it. It is not hostile. It asked for one night to communicate. I think it wants to help us, if we let it." Lena shook her head. "You cannot be sure. We have no idea what it is capable of. We have survived by staying cautious, Nolan. We cannot risk the safety of the colony based on a single encounter." Other colonists joined them. Some supported Nolan, saying the Zillan could be an ally, sharing knowledge of the ice and underground tunnels. Others were scared, arguing that humans should never trust a species they did not understand. Arguments grew louder, tension rising in the hall. Nolan felt the weight of responsibility. He knew the Zillan had not shown aggression. It had only asked for understanding. But he also understood the fear of the colonists. 10 years of struggle had taught humans to protect themselves first. Trust came slowly, if at all. He spoke to the group, his voice steady. I understand your fear. I felt it too at first. But the Zillan is different from what we expected. It has lived alone for 10 years, watching us. It does not want to harm us. It wants to connect, to share knowledge that could help us survive. We cannot ignore this chance. Lena studied Nolan carefully, seeing the honesty in his eyes. And if it betrays us, she asked softly. If we let it in and it brings danger. Nolan shook his head. I do not think it will. It has waited 10 years for one night of trust. If it wanted to attack, it could have done so before. I believe it is sincere. Still, not all were convinced. A group of colonists began to discuss capturing the Zillan, to study it and make sure it could not harm them. Fear had taken root, and it was difficult to remove. Nolan realized that understanding would take time, and one night was not enough for the colony to feel safe. That evening, Nolan returned to the ice plains, hoping to meet the Zillan again. The alien was waiting, as if it had known he would come. Nolan explained what had happened in the colony, the arguments, the fear, and the doubts. The Zillan listened silently, its glowing eyes reflecting patience. Nolan said, some want to capture you. Some are afraid. I tried to explain, but fear is strong. They do not yet understand. The Zillan extended its hand, and Nolan felt the warmth and calmness it shared. A sense of understanding passed between them without words. The alien did not retreat or show anger. It seemed to accept that building trust would take more than one night. Together, they walked along the ice, sharing more knowledge about survival. The Zillan showed hidden cracks and safe paths across the frozen plains, places humans had avoided. Nolan realized that if the colony learned to work with the Zillan, life on Varlan could become easier. Storms and ice could be navigated more safely, and energy and food could be managed more efficiently. As the night fell, Nolan knew he faced a choice. He could retreat to the colony, avoiding the arguments and fear, or he could continue to build trust between humans and Zillan. He chose the latter. This was not only about survival, it was about proving that humans could rise above fear, that understanding and courage could bring two species together. The Zillan projected a vision into Nolan's mind, humans and Zillan working together, sharing knowledge, and protecting each other from storms and dangers. Nolan smiled, feeling hope. This vision could become real if he was patient and persistent. The wind howled around them, but it no longer felt empty. Nolan looked at the glowing eyes of the Zillan and felt determination. Fear among humans would take time to fade, but he believed that with careful steps, trust could grow. One night had begun the process, and now the challenge was to continue it, showing humans that courage and understanding could overcome doubt. The icy plains stretched before them, dark and quiet, but full of possibility. Shadows of doubt lingered in the colony, but in the night with the Zillan, Nolan felt that hope was stronger. The next steps would be difficult, but the future could be brighter. Humans and Zillan could survive together, not as strangers, but as allies. Nolan walked through the colony with a careful determination. He knew that fear and doubt still lingered among the colonists, but he also knew that the Zillan could help them survive and thrive on Varlan. He needed a small group of humans who could see past fear, who could understand the value of working together with an alien who had endured 10 years of isolation. He found Lena first. She had watched the Zillan carefully, weighing Nolan's words, and now she listened with cautious interest. If we try this, she said, we cannot fail. The colony depends on every choice we make. Nolan nodded. I know. But the Zillan can guide us. It knows the ice and tunnels. If we learn from it, we can avoid danger and make the colony stronger. I believe it wants to help, not harm. Lena hesitated, then agreed to assemble a small team. Nolan selected engineers, scientists, and a few trusted explorers. Each had seen the harshness of Varlin and knew that survival required more than machines, it required cooperation, intelligence, and courage. The Zillan waited on the ice plains, just outside the colony. As Nolan approached, it extended a hand in greeting, calm and patient. Nolan smiled. The alien's eyes reflected hope, a hope that was beginning to spread to humans willing to try something new. The team followed Nolan as the Zillan led them toward hidden tunnels and icy pathways. At first, the humans were cautious, stepping carefully and observing the aliens' movements. The Zillan projected images into Nolan's mind, showing the safest routes, places where ice was strong, and areas to avoid. Humans who had once feared the unknown now saw the value of guidance. They reached a chamber beneath the ice where the Zillan had stored knowledge of its world. Crystals glowed softly, illuminating walls lined with patterns and symbols. Nolan explained to the team that understanding these structures could help them navigate Varlin more safely, predict storms, and conserve energy. The engineers marveled at the Zillan's technology, even though it was simple in design. It relied on natural energy from the planet, efficiency, and careful observation rather than complicated machinery. Nolan realized that humans could learn not only about survival but about balance, patience, and intelligence. Over the next hours, humans and Zillan worked together. They repaired broken equipment, mapped safe paths through the ice, and shared ideas for improving the colony. The Zillan projected diagrams that showed how energy could flow more efficiently and how water sources under the ice could be accessed. The humans implemented these ideas quickly, and results were immediate. Lena watched with cautious pride as fear began to fade. Some colonists who had doubted Nolan's decision now saw the potential. The Zillan did not demand trust, it offered help, patience, and guidance. Humans responded with effort, courage, and determination. Slowly, a fragile alliance was forming. Nolan felt a sense of fulfillment he had not known before. 10 years of cold and isolation had shaped the Zillan, but those years of endurance had also created wisdom that humans could use. He realized that survival was no longer only about strength or resources. Cooperation, understanding, and respect could be even more powerful. As the humans and Zillan continued to work, the wind outside seemed less threatening. The ice plains were still cold and dangerous, but there was a sense of shared purpose. Humans and aliens were learning to move together, to communicate, and to trust in ways they had never imagined. By the end of the day, the team returned to the colony with maps, repaired equipment, and new knowledge. Even some of the most skeptical colonists were impressed. Fear had not disappeared, but it was balanced with hope and understanding. The Zillan had shown that one night of trust could lead to something much larger, a beginning of partnership that could change life on Varlin. Nolan stood with the Zillan outside the domes as the sun set. The sky glowed with green and purple, the ice reflecting the colors in gentle waves. "We are only beginning," Nolan said quietly. The Zillan nodded, its luminous eyes reflecting the promise of future cooperation. For the first time in a decade, humans and Zillan were not strangers. They were allies. They had shared knowledge, strength, and courage. They had begun to build a future together, showing that even in the harshest worlds, understanding and trust could survive. The night fell, cold but hopeful, as humans and Zillan prepared to face the challenges of Varlin together. The first alliance had been formed, fragile but strong. Nolan knew there would be more trials ahead, but he also knew that courage, patience, and cooperation could overcome fear. And in that moment, on the icy plains under a sky of shifting colors, Nolan felt that Varlin had become a place not only of survival but of hope, a world where two species could work together to create something stronger than either could achieve alone. The colony had begun to change. Humans moved with more confidence, using the knowledge shared by the Zillan. Paths through the ice were safer, generators ran more efficiently, and water from underground streams reached the domes with less effort. The first alliance had proven its value, and hope was spreading. Nolan walked outside one morning, checking the generator that powered the colony's heating system. The wind was sharper than usual, cutting through his jacket and gloves. The Zillan appeared beside him silently, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon. Something in the air felt different, a tension beneath the cold calm. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Nolan stumbled, gripping the generator for support. The Zillan raised a hand, sensing the disturbance before Nolan could understand it. Ice cracked in the distance, deep fissures spreading like jagged lines across the plains. A massive ice quake had begun. Nolan's heart raced. The colony was at risk. If the quake reached the domes, everything could collapse. He turned to the Zillan. "We need to act fast. Can you guide us?" The Zillan nodded and projected a path through the ice, showing tunnels and chambers that would provide temporary shelter. Nolan called the team and the colonists, directing them to follow the safe route. Panic spread among the humans, but seeing the Zillan calm and confident gave them courage. The group moved quickly, guided by the Zillan's knowledge of the underground network. They passed over frozen lakes and cracked ice, stepping carefully but without hesitation. The Zillan led, Nolan close behind, ensuring no one fell behind. Humans who had doubted the alien now relied on its guidance, their fear replaced with trust and determination. Inside a wide chamber beneath the ice, the colonists gathered, catching their breath. The Zillan projected images showing areas above that were most at risk. Nolan explained how to reinforce parts of the colony temporarily while the quake passed. Engineers and scientists worked together, following the aliens' directions and their own training. Time felt urgent. The ice above groaned and cracked, sending tremors through the tunnels. Yet, with every action, the humans and Zillan worked together efficiently. Machines were stabilized, supports reinforced, and critical systems monitored. The Zillan shared knowledge that humans could not have discovered alone, while the humans contributed their own skills and ingenuity. Hours passed, and the tremors began to subside. The quake was not completely over, but the colony had survived. The domes were intact, generators still running, and no lives were lost. Humans and Zillan had faced the storm together, proving that their alliance could overcome even the harshest dangers of Varlin. After the crisis, Nolan walked with the Zillan through the calm tunnels. "You saved lives today," he said. "Without your guidance, we would have lost much more." The Zillan responded with a projection of light, showing gratitude and humility. It had shared its knowledge not to dominate but to help. Nolan understood that this moment marked a turning point. Humans and Zillan could do more than survive, they could thrive, each learning from the other. Lena approached Nolan later in the day. Her face was serious but proud. "The alliance worked. You were right. Trust can overcome fear when it is combined with action and understanding." Nolan nodded. "It is only the beginning. There will be more challenges, but now humans and Zillan know we can face them together. We can learn from each other, and the colony will be stronger because of it." Word of the survival spread quickly among the colonists. Even those who had doubted Nolan and the Zillan began to see the value of cooperation. The alien was no longer a stranger or a threat. It had proven itself as an ally in the worst situation the colony had faced in years. That night, Nolan and the Zillan stood outside the domes, looking at the calm ice plains. The sky glowed with green and purple light, reflecting off the smooth surfaces. Silence surrounded them, but it felt different now, less cold, less lonely. The shared experience of facing danger together had created a bond stronger than words. Nolan realized that survival was no longer a matter of machines, shelter, or food alone. It was about trust, understanding, and courage. Humans and Zillan had discovered that their strengths complemented each other. Alone, they might have struggled, but together, they could face even the most dangerous challenges of Varlin. The Zillan's glowing eyes met Nolan's, and he felt a calm confidence pass between them. 10 years of isolation, one night of trust, and now shared trials had brought them closer. The alien had asked for understanding, and now it had partnership. Together, they would face whatever the frozen world could send their way. Nolan turned to look at the colony's domes, standing strong against the icy winds. He smiled, feeling hope and pride. Humans and Zillan had survived the quake, learned from each other, and proved that cooperation could triumph over fear. The future of Varlin was no longer uncertain. It was full of possibility. The colony on Varlin was quiet as the sun set, turning the ice into soft shades of gold and violet. Humans had learned to work with the Zillan, and the alliance had strengthened over time. The quake had tested them, and both species had proven that cooperation could overcome fear and danger. Tonight, Nolan felt that something special was about to happen. He walked across the icy plains to meet the Zillan. The alien waited at a familiar ridge, glowing softly under the last light of day. Its eyes were calm, yet bright, reflecting a depth of feeling Nolan had come to understand over many nights. They had faced fear together, shared knowledge, and learned from each other. This night felt different, quieter, yet full of meaning. Nolan spoke softly. "We have come far together. Humans are learning, and I think they understand now. You have helped us survive and trust. I am proud of what we have done." The Zillan inclined its head, and for a moment, no words were needed. Instead, it projected feelings into Nolan's mind: relief, hope, and something deeper. Nolan realized it had waited 10 years for connection, 10 years of cold nights watching from a distance. Now, after one night that grew into many, the Zillan had found understanding and friendship. Nolan remembered the first night, the hesitation, the fear, and the wonder. He thought of the colonists above, how some had doubted, some had resisted, but all had learned the value of trust. Cooperation had saved lives, strengthened the colony, and built a bridge between humans and Zillan that could never be broken. The Zillan reached out a hand, and Nolan placed his own above it. Warmth passed between them, not of fire or energy, but of understanding and connection. The alien spoke softly, its voice echoing in Nolan's mind. "One night, that is all I asked." Nolan smiled. It became more than one night. It became many nights of trust, learning, and survival. "We are stronger together." They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the horizon. The ice reflected the colors of the sky, and the wind carried the calm of the evening. Nolan felt that the frozen world of Varlin was no longer empty or hostile. It was a place of hope, where two species could share knowledge, courage, and understanding. Nolan thought of the challenges they had faced: the storms, the isolation, the quake. Each had tested humans and Zillan alike. Yet, each had also shown what was possible when fear was replaced with trust. They had learned that survival was not only about machines, shelters, or food. It was about courage, patience, and respect. The Zillan projected images of its past, showing the tunnels and chambers it had called home for so many years. Nolan saw the loneliness, the patience, and the longing for connection. He understood why one night of trust had been so important. That night had begun a journey, but it had also healed a decade of isolation. Nolan spoke again, softly but firmly. "We have survived storms, quakes, and fear. We have learned from each other. Humans and Zillan can face the future together. This is only the beginning, but it is a strong beginning." The Zillan's eyes glowed brighter, reflecting approval and understanding. It had found what it had waited for all these years: companionship, respect, and hope. Nolan felt a sense of pride and joy that he had not known before. Together, they had turned fear into trust, isolation into partnership, and cold nights into meaningful connection. As the stars appeared in the sky above Varlin, the colony glowed softly in the distance. Nolan and the Zillan stood together, two beings from different worlds, looking toward a future that was no longer uncertain. The ice plains stretched before them, vast and still, but no longer empty. They had learned that understanding and courage could create warmth even in the coldest place. Nolan turned to the Zillan. We will continue to learn from each other. Humans will teach you about our ways, and you will teach us about yours. Together, we can make this world better for all of us. The Zillan extended a hand one last time. Nolan placed his hand above it, feeling the warmth of connection and the strength of shared trust. One night had become many nights, one meeting had become an alliance, and 10 years of cold nights had ended with hope. The wind carried a quiet calm, and the sky glowed with green and purple light, reflecting the promise of tomorrow. Humans and Zillan had faced danger, learned from each other, and built a bond that could survive anything Varlin would send their way. Nolan smiled, looking at the alien who had whispered 10 years ago. One night, that is all you asked. But it became more. And it will continue to grow, as long as we have courage and trust. The Zillan inclined its head in agreement. Together, they watched the stars, knowing that this night would be remembered forever. It was the night that began a new era for humans and Zillan, a night that showed that understanding, courage, and friendship could survive even in the coldest, harshest world.